In 1970, most immigrants came from other European nations: Finland, Yugoslavia, Denmark and Greece. In the 1980s, many also came from Iran, Chile, Lebanon and Turkey. And in the last 10 years, the numbers have taken off. And so today, around 1.6 million people living here were born in another country. That's 16% of the population.
Once upon a time, there was a safe welfare state called Sweden. This beautiful part of Sweden that we call Skåne is where my forefathers lived as long back as I have been able to research, the beginning of the 18th century. Now, Sweden has turned into Absurdistan, a country that has one of the highest number of reported rapes in the world. Hundreds of so-called exclusion areas, more than 55 no-go zones where police and ambulance get stoned, and Sharia law is becoming more important than Swedish law. Once upon a time, people rarely locked their doors in this area. Now, this country is a night watchman state. Each man is on his own. Last year, 163,000 asylum seekers came to Sweden, and even though we have since then introduced border controls, the prognosis is that somewhere between 70,000 and 140,000 will come this year, to a country with a total population of 9.5 million. In November last year, I interviewed salesmen from several security companies. They all said that there is a really high demand for alarm systems right now. One of them said, "It is largely due to the turbulence we are seeing around the country. People have lost confidence in the state. The police will not come anymore." One of the things that Swedes are most scared of is rape. Even though it's forbidden to keep statistics on the rapist's ethnic background or religion, we know who is behind the near 1,500% increase of rapes in Sweden. Almost every day we can read in the so-called alternative media about rapes against Swedish women and girls committed by asylum seekers or other migrants from the third world. Up until a few decades ago, no one had heard about gang rape. Now it happens every week. This has of course been going on for many years, but the Swedes have been so brainwashed by the government and the mainstream media that no one has protested about the rape on Sweden. But that has all changed. These days, no one can escape the horrible realities. Just a couple of miles from here is a little village that used to have 900 inhabitants. But last year the authorities placed 400 asylum seekers in that little village. That means that almost half of the total population is now people from Somalia, Eritrea, Afghanistan and Syria. It's really turned the whole village upside down. I have talked to people who live and work around there. At first, they were happy to welcome people to their part of the world. They arranged lunches and Christmas celebrations and donated clothing to the migrants. Now, many of the locals are afraid and confused. With tears in their eyes, they tell me how their friendly village has been totally transformed by these young, aggressive male asylum seekers. The asylum seekers scream at the locals, call the women whores, they steal from the shops, and don't seem at all grateful or happy to be here. Many wonder what these asylum seekers expected when they arrived in Sweden. Daily Svenska Dagbladet interviewed Salar from Iraq, who complained. We can't sit here and wait for the decision on residence permit indefinitely. We sit at the asylum house all day long and do nothing. Our children have nothing to do. There is no playground here. And the food that is served here is strange. It doesn't at all look like the food we are used to. Salar is not alone. Actually, more people are going back to Iraq now than coming here. This year, 1,243 have applied for asylum and 1,366 have taken the application back.
Det här är ett meddelande till alla resenärer som ska återvandra till Afghanistan, Somalia, Irak, Rumänien, Syrien, Eritrea, Turkiet, Uzbekistan och Marocko. Era flyg är redo för avfärd. Gå till gate. Ombordstigningen börjar nu. Observera att flygplanen abonneras av Återvandringsverket för invandrare som på olika sätt har missbrukat vår gästfrihet. Säg hej då till Sverige. Det är dags att åka hem.
Det finns ingen väg tillbaka.
Sverige blir aldrig som det varit.
Europa är i förändring.
Och Sverige behövs som en trygg plats för människor på flykt.
Nu måste vi söka vägar framåt och hitta ett sätt för alla att leva tillsammans.
Det är dags att inse att nya svenskar kommer att ta plats.
Med kultur, språk och vanor.
Och det är dags att se det som en positiv kraft.
Att vara svensk måste få vara mer än hudfärg och födelse ut.
Det måste få vara du, jag och alla tillsammans.
Det är inte bara nya svenskar som ska integreras.
Alla behöver integreras, även etablerade svenskar.
Integration handlar om ömsesidighet.
Låt oss skapa en framtid
som bygger på lika delar realitet och framtidstro.
Låt oss bygga ett land
där vi sätter hat och rädsla åt sidan.
Vi har alla det nya landet inom oss.
I våra synsätt, tankar och handlingar.
Det är dags att vi tillsammans formar ett land
som är stolt, inkluderande och hållbart. Något nytt.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! زمان كان الجماعة اشتادين 6/15 وزاد بالهواء على المظاهرة الله أكبر.
Tack. Har du passport? ID-kort? No passport, no ID-kort. Okay. Wait a minute. Listen. You will go outside, then we will help you. So just follow me. Do you understand?
Good luck. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. Welcome to Sweden.
We are at the Malmö station in the south of Sweden, one of the country's main entry points. A large open door that slammed shut suddenly last November. Over the course of a few months, thousands of people entered the country every day along these rails. Syrian asylum seekers, Iraqis and Somalis sought refuge in this country long considered a haven for refugees. Now all passengers arriving from the mainland are controlled.
Where do you live?
Here. I'm from Boston.
Sweden has a tradition of always helping people in need, and we want to carry on with that tradition. But I think the politics also see a different Europe today than before. Countries do not want to take the responsibilities, and I think the politicians saw this and that it was too many to handle for Sweden alone.
My crew and I were attacked. We had things thrown at us, we were punched and kicked, and my cameraman was run over. Unfortunately, Sweden has become a victim of its own humanity. By opening its doors and welcoming hundreds of thousands of refugees and asylum seekers from the world's war zones and trouble spots, the country is experiencing serious security issues. And it's not alone. The migrant crisis has now become so huge, many Western European nations are closing their borders. But that hasn't stopped the refugees coming in their desperate millions.
Hello. Welcome to the 6th episode on this series. Today we take a look at Sweden. In this video, we will explore different articles, blogs, videos, and more importantly, facts about the European migration crisis. Let me bring you hours of research and come visit some of the most beautiful areas in Sweden while taking a look at the last few years and how the country has changed. Sweden has often been called the most forward-thinking country. Their government is feminist and the public is mostly liberal. Genders run as fluid as water and politically correct culture rules the land. Remember back in the day when you used to think of Sweden and immediately have an image of a Nordic European, tall, white or tan blonde. We can say this image has been changing along the years. Let me remind you of the beauty in Sweden.
Sweden has always had a reputation of being a harmonious and liberal society. This image has been shattered as rape has skyrocketed over the past 5 years. At the same time, Sweden has been going through a revolutionary demographic shift that has seen the country take in more refugees from Islamic countries than any Western nation in the world. This immigration has led to culture clashes and to enclaves of self-contained societies across Sweden. This is Annika Henroth-Rothstein. She's a Swedish journalist who has extensively covered the Middle Eastern migration into Sweden.
What we have is, first of all, a Swedish culture. Then we bring in, like last year, 190,000 people that come from a very different culture, a culture that isn't liberal, that has radically different views on women, on sexuality, on gender, on all these things. There's an explosion.
Yeah, it will be clashes.
If Greece has carried more than its share of the burden, so too has Sweden. A nation with less than half the population of Australia took in 165,000 refugees last year alone and is starting to buckle under the pressure. This is a country that's barely coping. Only 6 months ago, Sweden was proudly proclaiming itself the humanitarian superpower of the world. Now it's closing its borders to refugees without identity papers. And its neighbours are being even tougher. Denmark is stripping asylum seekers of valuables to help pay for their upkeep, confiscating cash and jewellery, basically everything except wedding rings. The message couldn't be clearer. Please, no more refugees.
A leafy northern suburb of Stockholm, also a completely Islamic area. The police have said this is a complete no-go for them and for journalists. Here, a 60 Minutes crew from Australia is attacked while doing a story on Rinkeby.
In order to come here and to prosper, you have to adapt to that culture. And that what we're doing in Europe is the complete opposite. They are saying, how can we adapt to you?
Do you think that Sweden has a responsibility to adapt to the immigrants' culture coming in?
Definitely.
Should a woman, when they come here, dress, modestly, with pants and with sleeves? Is that important?
It is our culture.
If you come to Rinkeby, obviously everywhere in Sweden is a dress code,
I got Swedish girlfriend. Sometimes I say we go to Rinkeby, he's scared.
Right.
He's scared.
Is it dangerous here sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah.
Här har ni lösningen, där har ni problemet och här har ni lösningen. Återvandring, eller hur?
Is it refugee overload?
Yes, it's a refugee overload. That's a good word.
Just too many people?
Too many people and too many people of the wrong kind.
Like many of his countrymen, Jan Hunnesson is calling time. This one-time school teacher and more recently political activist says Sweden is on the brink of an economic and cultural disaster.
The problem with a generous welfare state like Sweden is that we're very, very soft.
And this is an example, he says, of Sweden's too trusting acceptance of young refugees, men posing as boys to claim special treatment.
This is an athlete, and he's called Sweden's fastest 14-year-old.
So he is said to be a 14-year-old?
Yes. It's a bit hilarious, but if you're 18 and above, you don't get the benefits that you get if you're under 18, and you can't be thrown out with the same kind of laws and force.
Will the generosity stop?
Well, if you call it that generosity to ruin your own country, yes, it has to stop.
For all its generosity, Sweden is now grappling with communities of disaffected migrants who can't find jobs and have few prospects. The country's image was shattered 3 years ago when riots broke out in the Stockholm suburb of Husby. There are now 55 declared no-go zones in Sweden, where police have to escort ambulances to ensure their safety. And as we found out, the temperature is similar in the suburb of Rinkeby, home to mostly Somali migrants. Within minutes of us arriving, a group of young men make it clear we're not wanted and deliberately run down our cameraman.
Whoops! Nej men vad fan!
Hey, 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 hey.
Go on! Shit! What happened?
You all right?
Your leg?
You went out your foot.
Are you all right?
We found out exactly how dangerous when, while we were setting up a shoot at a neighboring location, we were approached by 5 men and told to leave. While my crew took off, I stayed to simply ask why we had to leave. Because I was still wired, we had the sound of what happened next.
How come it's a problem to film here?
I don't want to be filmed.
I know, but why? What's the why?
I just don't want to. Spawn, you know?
But why?
Let me see. Let me see.
I'm not filming anything. Look.
Show me what you got.
Let go of me.
Show me what you got.
Show me.
Show me you
I let go. I'll show you.
I don't want your phone. Show me.
Let go and I'll show you. I was not the first person assaulted by gangs of immigrants, nor will I be the last. But women are taking the brunt of the explosion of violence across Sweden. When I went to a police station, I noticed that the vast majority of the people waiting to report a crime were women. Later, the police officer who I met with told me that most were there to report rape. These attacks are happening across Sweden, including a rash of rapes at music festivals. Over the past 2 years, dozens of young women, some as young as 12, were raped at these festivals across Sweden by hundreds of young immigrants. They use the tactic where dozens of men surround one or more girls in circles. While the men in the inner circle sexually attacks their victims, the outer circle distracts and keeps out anyone who would stop it. The attacks have become so common that some bands, most notably Mumford & Sons, refuse to play in Sweden.
This has happened multiple times and to multiple victims. Then the issue is that when it is reported, this was widely known by the people who were there, the police that was on the scene, but then they put the lid on it. So they covered it up. They covered it up. So we didn't learn about this until much, much later.
While the police have told me that the majority of the people that they arrest for rape are from Islamic backgrounds, BRA, the official keeper of Swedish crime statistics, curiously dropped the background of those arrested from the official statistics.
The government has failed to recognize that it's made a huge mistake. And the European Union has failed to recognize that it's made a huge mistake when we have this free movement. And the movement, of course, is flowing toward the country with the most generous social benefit system.
The type of benefits that immigrants receive in Sweden are significant and are all-encompassing, and include housing, food, education, and additional cash.
Does the government give enough to the immigrants?
Yeah, everything's enough. This good world here.
Yeah, life is good here. Better.
Life is good, better here.
They give me a lot. They give me a house, room, clothes, my school.
All the Swedish government pays for it.
It's a little more hostile than I had anticipated.
Okay, welcome to
Rinkeby. It's also called Little Mogadishu.
And is that what you're worried about for the future of Sweden? That clash, this clash?
Yes, of course. Now, one of your film crew members was run over by a car here, and it took us 1.5 minutes. So
yes, we're literally just out of the car, and aggression.
And they didn't have any reason to do that, did they?
No, well, definitely not.
No.
We call the police. To be honest, we hadn't anticipated such intense aggression. Our cameraman was... And even they fear their presence will be provocative.
I think it's better if you go in without us, because I think it would be...
very aggressive.
Yeah,
okay.
So we will stay here, and if it
that's
is...
fine.
You watch us.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Majority here are Muslims from East Africa, and they don't assimilate well into the Swedish culture and society, and they're unemployed and they're poor. So you add all these factors together, and their youth are feeling marginalized and don't speak Swedish very well, so they don't get jobs or get into the Swedish youth culture either.
But not everyone is hostile.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my cousin lives in Melbourne.
Many locals are polite and friendly and happy to talk.
It's good.
Yeah.
I'm very happy.
But what happened next changed everything. The police leave, and as we prepare to go, young men masking their faces arrive.
Good, you're doing good. You're doing good?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Take it easy.
Okay, you too.
And attack.
Go! Mate! Go! Don't you touch me! Okay, we're gonna do.
Excuse me. No, please.
Get out of here.
No, we are leaving, but you don't need to hurt us. There's no need to be unkind. Hey,
You can't film. No, don't do it.
The gang's attention turns when a local intervenes and drives his mobility scooter into the most violent attacker. Move. Well, we've been individually attacked. Soundman has been punched, the producer's been punched, you've been run over, the cameraman. We've all been assaulted and insulted. It's best we leave.
You wanted to film them. They didn't want to be filmed.
No.
They had to go at you.
Oh, yeah.
Beat you up?
Yeah, there was 5 guys. They jumped on top of me. They were punching me. They were choking me. They were stomping on me. And then I looked around because we're in a busy square, right? This no-go area called Husby. I thought, okay, somebody's going to pull them off of me at one point, you know, the next few seconds. And I noticed that nobody's pulled them off of me.
Were you wearing a yarmulke?
No.
You were not?
No, not identified as I'm Jewish. They had no idea. It wasn't about that. It was about that this is an Islamic enclave, and you cannot come here as a foreigner with a camera crew. But the issue is that I don't use the word no-go. The police that I was interviewing, they said that these are, in their words, a state within a state.
What you're describing is an explosive situation in Sweden, got it, but across the rest of Europe as well.
We just saw it in Berlin. This is the exact, this is the same side, it's a different side of the same coin.
From your experience, would you say that an explosion, civil strife, fighting between the two communities, is that likely?
You're already seeing it. Just in Stockholm themselves, they've had major riots with the Islamic communities. And absolutely, it's happening there. It's happened in France. It's happened in England. It's going to happen. It's happening everywhere. Of course there is. It's a culture clash.
Land of social justice warriors, feminists, and liberals, like this woman who thought she was doing social justice by breaking aviation law and ending up getting arrested for trying to stop the deportation of a refugee. But regardless of how generous and how liberal they can get, crime rates are soaring high, in a way that police stations have been forced to accept that they do not have enough manpower to protect the Swedish people. This has caused segregation, no-go zones, and states inside a state, where the rule of the law does not apply, and police are not welcome. A police officer also stated, "As soon as they enter those areas, we stop chasing them." I will show you unfortunate encounters with women, the elderly, violent reactions, gang rape, child grooming, and what is worse, police have reported rape cases of children as young as 3 years old. This is certainly not a country where I would want my children to grow up in.
And the people here working are trying to take my phone away from me just because the person is going to get deported to Afghanistan where there's war and he's going to get killed.
There are reports of a crime surge, sex attacks in Sweden. Some people are attributing that to the surge in Muslim migrants going into that country, Sweden, in recent years. Filmmaker Amir Horowitz made a documentary there, and he's with us today. This is a repeat performance because you showed us some of this stuff before.
Indeed.
A sex attack surge in Sweden. We're not used to hearing about that. Is it true? Is it legit?
Absolutely. The numbers are actually off the charts. In the last 10 years, they've more than doubled the number of sex crimes. And it tracks, and here's the problem, is where is this stuff coming from? And it really does track with the surge in Islamic immigration that's coming from not just Syria, but really around the world. And the problem is the Swedes themselves just refuse to acknowledge it.
Well, I've got some statistics here. As of 2010, and that's before the surge in Muslim migrants arrived, 2010, 14% of the Swedish population was foreign-born. That's a fair proportion would be Muslim then. It's much a higher proportion now, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's extraordinarily high.
And is it true that there are what I would call ghettos in major Swedish cities, which are some people describe as no-go zones?
Yeah, the police describe them as no-go zones. The problem is that, you know, in the intelligentsia out there, if you watch the BBC and you watch NPR and you watch CNN sometimes, they'll have an actual debate whether or not these no-go zones even exist. I can tell you, I went there, I know they exist. This is a former police station which had to be moved a couple of years ago. Now the police will tell you that it simply became too unsafe for them to have a full-time presence here. This man has been playing the accordion for several years, trying to bring some musical cheer to the suburb. Yet, he has faced numerous attacks.
My music, and the people, boo, 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 the police, but the police.
You need the police here?
Yeah, the police, they go back the police here.
Would you go as far as to say that these no-go areas are essentially states within a state?
Yeah, most of the no-go areas is like that.
Are there areas where if you're pursuing somebody, where you'll simply stop and not pursue them once they get into this no-go area?
Yeah.
If the police is chasing another car for some kind of crime, if they reach what we call no-go areas, the police wouldn't go after it.
Do you see the violence really spreading across Sweden into the cities?
At least 1 or 2 times a week.
And let's say 5 years ago, how often would you say it was?
No.
3 times a year.
Really? The increase in this kind of crime is exponential.
I think we caught off guard. We didn't expect it to be so much increase.
Do you think there's a deliberate attempt to cover up these type of crimes?
Rather than that they don't want to seem racist.
Is there a sort of sensitivity or are people scared that if you identify who's committing these type of crimes, that you could be labeled a racist?
Of course, I think this is these issues make people nervous all over the world, not only even in Sweden. This make me nervous as well. If we're talking about that,
because you don't want to be called racist.
No, this racist card is very hard to deal with, you know. Of course, especially if you are blonde like me.
And now to add to these woes, Sweden has had dozens of people go to fight for ISIS, and they're starting to come back. Sweden has had its first Islamic terrorist attack.
We Are Stockholm is a music festival for teenagers in the town centre, devised 16 years ago to keep kids out of trouble. But for the last 2 summers, some of the people it was designed to help have used it as an opportunity for something more sinister. It looks a little different in the snow, but this is where the festival happened, and where teenage girls say they were groped, harassed, and even raped by young men, allegedly in the main young Afghan asylum seekers. But it's taken 5 months and the events in Germany for the story to emerge, because although the police were aware of the crimes, they didn't make them public. And that's left this country that's always prided itself on its welcoming, open attitudes to refugees, grappling with some awkward questions. It was a cover-up, wasn't it?
No, we didn't cover up, of course we didn't, but we didn't tell. And there are so many things we don't tell, because we have so much information, so much things going on, we have hundreds of cases every 24 hours, and in this case, we didn't tell. And that was a mistake, a big mistake today. But of course it wasn't a cover-up.
So if teenage girls had reported sexual assaults by white Swedes at this event, would you have taken the same decision?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that we never, in the police, we never talk about if they're Swedes or if they come from any other parts. The media does, but we don't.
At the 170,000-strong festival in 2014, 17 teenagers said they'd been sexually attacked and one complained of rape. A year later, there were 19 assaults and 1 rape. 1 person is being prosecuted.
These guys, they were like 5, 10, 15 sometimes. The only goal for them to go into this crowd is to sexually harass these young girls.
Roger Tikwalu set up the festival and still runs it for Stockholm City Council.
And in the beginning, it looks like they're having just fun and, you know, dancing in this huge crowd of people. And then what happens that they surround them and start to gather around them, and then suddenly they start to sexually harass them, you know, touching breasts, the crouch and stuff like that.
Do you think the sexual assault problem is an Islamic problem or not really?
No, I think it's a general problem among men.
Yeah, the problem isn't like this culture or that culture. The problem is male culture.
I don't think the immigrants is the problem.
No, it's not. Like, that's just like a tiny bit of the problem, and like when that happens, like it's because we didn't like bring them in the right way.
And I don't see that connection at all, and I would very much like to see the evidence of such a connection.
Do you think it's almost racist to make that connection?
Yes, I think so.
Is there a point where you think that Sweden's done too much to bring people in, or do you think there's...
No, there is no too much in helping people.
And is there a limit, do you think, to how many immigrants Sweden can take?
No.
Residents are rocked by attacks in Sweden where migrants set fire to over 100 cars across the country in what police say are well-coordinated attacks. When America's Pearson Sharp has the latest.
The Swedish authorities are struggling to clean up after a gang of migrants sets fire to over 100 cars in the city of Gothenburg Monday night. Police say, considering how many cars were torched in such a short time across the city, the incidents may be connected. Groups of young migrants from Africa and the Middle East rampaged across Gothenburg, as well as a few surrounding towns, in what officials say appeared to be a well-prepared and organized attack. Several cars were set on fire in the capital of Stockholm as well. The attacks began at exactly 9 p.m. and took place in at least 5 different cities, carried out by gangs dressed in all black. Residents were shocked and alarmed.
I looked out of the window and saw all the fire engines in the foam and rushed to see what it looked like. It was devastating.
And they weren't the only ones. Sweden's prime minister said he was outraged and that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated.
I get angry, and you have to ask these people, what the hell are you doing? Who do you think you are? You're destroying things for the whole area, for the neighbors, for the children who may have to go to nursery school in the morning and see that cars have been burned. As a result, society has to get tougher and give more resources towards this instead of improving the residential buildings in the area. This is completely unacceptable.
Strong words from the Prime Minister, but what does he plan to do about it? Well, the police are coming together in a coordinated show of force as they boldly prepare to go door to door and talk to the migrants. Because while police say they know who the perpetrators are and that the attacks are criminal and are classified as arson, vandalism, and fierce rioting, their plan is to caution the parents of the migrants and warn them about these dangerous activities. And despite admitting that they know who the culprits are and that many serious crimes were committed, the police insist that so far, no one has been linked to any crime.
With this True News video update, I'm Kelly Sloan.
Gangs of young male migrants overpowered women and children at a train station in Stockholm and then robbed and groped them. Some of the refugees, who may be as young as 9, roam the streets day and night, according to Daily Mail. They have been offered help from Swedish authorities but have refused it, living in the streets instead. The influx in unaccompanied Moroccan minors has dramatically increased in the past few years. Officials are trying to send them back to their home country. Also in Sweden, a 22-year-old woman who was working at a refugee center was stabbed to death by a 15-year-old asylum seeker Monday night. Alexandra Mesher was attacked as she helped care for the children ages 14 to 17. She was described as an angel by family and friends, according to the Express. Last year, more than 148 violent incidents were reported at centers around the country.
In Sweden has come into fierce criticism over its coverage of the murder of those 2 Scandinavian girls by ISIL fighters in Morocco. Viewers say the channel downplayed the horrific incident. 1 Norwegian and 1 Danish girl were brutally killed while hiking in the Atlas Mountains. The video of their deaths spread online, and that saw the SVT channel slammed for not mentioning that one of the girls was beheaded or that Islamic State had claimed to be behind it. The broadcaster did, though, warn people against sharing the video for legal reasons.
In fact, experts in Finland now say that Sweden and its mass immigration Muslim crisis poses a greater threat to the country than even Russia. Sweden has taken in more migrants per capita than any other country and is proving to be the worst at helping them integrate, mainly because they aren't integrating at all. Native Swedes say there are numerous areas where Muslim migrants simply refuse to learn Swedish and instead create isolated towns apart from Swedish society. Even other Muslim migrants explained it was a problem and that immigrants must adopt Swedish culture if they want to live in Sweden. Instead, many live in ghettos where they turn to drugs and crime, and the Swedish police are too afraid to interfere. Sweden has responded to this crisis by accusing its own people of being the problem, saying employers don't have the international skills necessary to help migrants. Their solution? Bring in more Muslim migrants.
Swedish police say they can't cope with the growing number of rape cases in their country. That's what they told one journalist who wanted to know why a man suspected of raping a 12-year-old girl 2 months ago hasn't yet been questioned.
Well, I just wanted to check to see if you'd located a suspect or interrogated anyone.
No.
You haven't?
No, we haven't interrogated any suspects yet, but at least we have a name, and the investigation will tell us whether or not it's the right person, but...
See, what I'm getting at is, it's been over a month since the rape.
Do you know how many rapes occurred? Well, you might think so, but we have so many similar cases and so few people available, we cannot cope with the workload. We have 3-year-old children that get raped.
Without you being able to prosecute those who do it?
Yes.
The country's Minister of Justice has now weighed in, then saying that it's not right that police don't have time to investigate rapes. He suggests they should review their priorities. The number of sex crimes committed in Sweden has been on the rise. In the first half of this year, the number of rape cases had increased 14% on the previous year. That's reaching 3,500. A member of the Swedish Democrats Party agrees that police just don't have enough resources.
Or, in other words, they're so unskilled, we have to think up new jobs for them because none currently exist. One America News visited Sweden and talked to Jörgen Fugelklu, head of the Swedish Democrats Party in Gothenburg, who says Sweden just can't afford to support these kinds of migrants.
Those people who are coming from particularly the Middle East and North Africa, they do not qualify for work here. I think there is some surveys saying that it will take 8 years before half of those are employed at all.
The problem is so bad, in fact, that not a single asylum seeker has passed the job requirements for permanent residence in Sweden. A law was passed last year by the Migration Board, offering residence permits to immigrants who can meet certain working standards. Hundreds have applied, but not one has managed to meet even the most basic work requirements. Despite this, nearly 1,000 migrants have still been approved to remain in Sweden for at least another 2 years, all on the taxpayers' dime. The crisis in Sweden is growing. Native Swedes who have paid heavily into the state's welfare system are already discovering these vagrants are now living off their hard-earned cash and contributing nothing to the system.
Sweden we have a welfare system that everybody in Sweden are allowed to benefits. We pay high taxes and everybody gets free health care and free school and everything. And are we supposed to pay for another million people who will not contribute to the society? It's not going to work.
If the government continues pandering to the radicals and activists demanding mass migration, the rule of law in Sweden will quickly be erased, and the most generous country in Europe will crumble under its own progressive policies.
Young men in group treating this as some kind of fun way to spend an evening or to go to a party and just pick out women and harass them in group, rape them in group. That's definitely nothing that has been existing here before.
So you do blame migrants more generally?
For these kind of assaults, I blame the culture they come from, and I blame the fact that they don't want to accept that in Sweden we have a completely different view of women.
Now, in a reversal of its open door policy, the government says as many as half could face deportation. A growing right-wing reaction to the migrant influx has fueled tensions. From Stockholm, special correspondent Malcolm Brabant reports.
Sweden fashions itself as the world's humanitarian conscience and safe harbour for more refugees per capita than any other European nation. But it's been shaken by a series of incidents that have ruptured that image.
Mina 3 döttrar någonting. Förstår ni vi föräldrar, förstår ni vad ni håller på med? Du vet, jag kommer inte ge mig. Vi kommer se och se. Ni har blod på era jävla händer om det händer mina döttrar.
Angry parents standing up to politicians. They are saying no to a plan to build a home for asylum seekers near a school. This scene is not taking place in any of the countries that have been reluctant to receive refugees. Instead, it's taking place in Sweden, the nation that received more immigrants last year than any other country in proportion to the existing population.
De springer gatlopp dagligen för att de inte vågar ingripa när de här så kallade nyankomna kommer till Sverige. Hur fan ska ni kunna skydda våra barn som går här?
Today on Talk to Al Jazeera, the backlash against immigration in Sweden. Why the tide is turning. When we talk to the local people here to find out what they think, we got a mixed response.
Ja, jag är väl egentligen inte så insatt i det, men nej, det är väl rätt. Kanske lite mycket, men det är som sagt det är alltid roligt med olika kulturer som kommer in här. Så jag tycker bara det är roligt, men sen att man inte kanske kan ta hand om allting, då blir det svårt.
De gör väl så gott de kan, förstår jag. Det är ju svårt. Men ja, det har nog blivit lite mycket invandrare. Vi har ju haft problem med inbrott och själv har jag haft inbrott. Men det är ju något som man aldrig har varit med om förut. Men de flesta här har väl en kristen uppväxt och kommer det en annan religion. Och vi har ju det här att vi är öppna religionsfrihet. Alltså, men är det så att man tycker att religionen ska vara lag, då är det lite problematiskt förstås. För så ser ju inte vi på det här.
I would say that Sweden's social structures are under severe stress.
Magnus Ranstorp is an expert on extremism in Scandinavia.
It's a cocktail of various ingredients which makes society extremely polarized, and the government is having a really difficult time dealing with this.
As a refugee here, I would say it's pretty hostile.
Tina Morad is a Kurdish political scientist who fled from northern Iraq as a child and now advocates on behalf of fellow refugees.
We've noticed a lot of activities for the past week at least, where you have Nazis and racists crossing the streets and demonstrating against the refugees arriving to Sweden.
These are right-wing vigilantes, including football hooligans, apparently attacking immigrants. This precinct is where young Moroccans hang out. Many have acquired a reputation as petty criminals and troublemakers.
I don't think they are a problem, like they're a little human like me. But I think it's quite scary when you read on the news about like they attacking people. So yeah, I feel a bit scared sometimes.
Well, I heard about the attacks and I think it's awful that people are using violence. I think people should be more accepting and give some sympathy to these people who's been through enough already.
I think this is a rich land. We can afford to people come here, and so yes. It's also very much of them are well educated, and I think it's positive.
And this is one of his organization's videos. Are you Nazis?
No, not at all.
How can you prove that?
It's proved by my actions, or if you just walk around, look at our website, we have our program there, Manifest.
I think the greatest threat that Sweden is facing is that we have an equal amount of extremism. We have a lot of right-wing extremism and of course left-wing extremism. There is a sort of reciprocal radicalization going on. They are feeding and fueling each other.
Okay, I think with the refugees coming, there has been a change to Swedish society, but I don't see it as a negative one. I think we need cultural influence from other places in the world and new people. And honestly, I'm not worried for myself at all. I'm happy about these people coming and I want to welcome them, and I wish everybody could.
In the wake of these disturbances, the Swedish government is to launch a task force to crack down on vigilantes who might be thinking about taking the law into their own hands. And to soften the blow of deporting the young North Africans, the government is promising to set up a special centre in Morocco to house them in safety and security.
Vi började gråta för att få panik. Vi fick panik.
about 3 cases in the area of Västmanland, where the biggest city is Västerås, where police officers have been forced to push the alarm button because they are surrounded by angry immigrants that are fighting each other. The nice, secure and safe country that we once had, it's not really that nice anymore.
The answer is not mass migration, which is a globalist-inspired agenda to destroy European identity and cultural heritage. The European Union has been dissolving for years. Have people finally gotten tired of unelected officials telling them what to do? Will Sweden be able to reestablish their culture and not succumb to the aggressive avalanche of foreigners? Regardless of your perspective, regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of your gender or nationality, there is clearly a problem in countries that have received a high influx of asylum seekers and economic migrants. In some areas, life as they knew it will never be the same again, and the Swedish are worried about what their country might turn into. Join us next time to take a look at another country in this series. Become a patron if you like this content. Like, share, and subscribe, as this content will not be on television.